Good afternoon, grade 12s. Today we are going to have our first consolidation session, which means we are going to be covering a number of subtopics of the various content that we cover in term 1. So this is our first consolidation, and with me in studio I have Mr. Dion van Zyl. Good afternoon, Mr. van Zyl.
Afternoon, Mr. de Klerk.
And today we will be looking at the various topics. So these are the topics that we will be looking at today. So our process for this session is going to be a breakdown of the main and subtopics that we will that you normally cover throughout the year, the format of the exam papers that you will be writing at the end of the year, explanations of how the various marks are allocated depending on how the questions have been asked, and then we will go into the revision of quarter 1 topics, and in the end, if we have some time, we will look at the format of the essay writing questions. So topics that are normally covered in paper 1 will be business environments and business operations. And you will see under business environments, we have the impact of recent legislation. So those are all the laws that you're going to have to know. The business strategies, business sectors and their environment. So those are the 3 topics which fall under business environments. And under business operations, we have human resource function, as well as quality of performance. So there are 5 topics that you need to prepare for paper 1 under the headings of business environments and business operations. In paper 2, we have business ventures and business roles as the 2 main topics. And then under business ventures, there is investment securities, investment insurance, management and leadership, forms of ownership and their impact on the business, presentation of information and data response. So those are all the subtopics under business ventures. And under business roles, we have ethics and professionalism, creative thinking, team performance and conflict management, social responsibility, which incorporates social responsibility, corporate social responsibility, and corporate social investment, as well as human rights, inclusivity, and environmental issues. So those are all the topics that you cover throughout the year. So what you would notice from looking at that particular slide, there are 15 topics for the year. 5 topics are covered in paper 1 and 10 of the 15 topics are covered in paper 2. However, there is still a large amount of content for paper 1 because we know the laws make up a large section of the 5 topics that's covered in paper 1 under business environments. So looking back at the slide, we can see that today we're going to be looking at, under business environments, the impact of recent legislation on the business as well as business strategies. Under business operations, we're going to be looking at the human resource function, and under business roles, we're going to be looking at ethics and professionalism as well as creative thinking. Okay, then looking at the format of the 2 exam papers, they have the same format, but obviously the content differs between the 2 papers. So for both paper 1 as well as paper 2, there is 3 sections, section A, B, and C. Section A consists of question 1, which is compulsory, which means everybody has to do all the questions in question 1, section A. It will be made up of 15 questions, which counts 2 marks each, which makes the total value of question 1 in section A worth 30 marks. And the types of questions you can expect in the section A is multiple choice questions, choosing the correct answer, and matching the columns. And then in section B, there's going to be 3 questions, questions 2, 3, and 4. In paper 1, question 2 will be only on business environments for 40 marks. Question 3 will be only on business operations for 40 marks. And then question 4 will be a combination of questions based on business environments as well as business operations. And it will be 20 marks for business environments and 20 marks for business operations. And that will make up the 40 marks for question 4. And you can choose to answer 2 of the 3 questions. So you don't do all 3 questions in section B. You make a choice and you only answer 2 of the 3 optional questions in section B. And then section C has 2 essay questions. One is question 5, which must be on business environments and all the topics that fall under business environments. And question 6 will be only on business operations. And you're going to answer one of those 2 essays. So in your answering of paper 1, you will answer everything in question 1, section A. You'll answer 2 of the 3 optional questions in section B, and you'll answer 1 of the 2 optional essay questions in section C. And the format for paper 2 is similar. Obviously, the topic or the content will be slightly different, or will be different based on the different topics. So section A will work the same. And section B, question 2 will now be on business ventures. Question 3 will now be on business roles only. And then question 4 will be a combination where there will be 20 marks on business ventures and 20 marks on business roles to make up the 40 marks for question 4. And again, you choose and answer only 2 of those 3 optional questions that's available to you there. And then in section C, you're going to have question 5, which will only be on business ventures, and question 6 will only be on business roles, and you have to answer 1 of those 2 essay questions over there. So the paper will be out of 150 marks, and the amount of time available for you will be 2 hours. So you'll have 2 hours to complete the exam papers. So grade 12s, you need to remember that you will be using a lot of old question papers to revise and to prepare for this examination, but this is the first time that the final matric examination will be written over 2 papers. It was usually 1 paper. So although you, for the last 2 years, have been writing November exams where you've been having 2 papers already, this is the first time nationally that there will be 2 papers. So what is important is that when you start preparing and you're revising through old exam papers, you need to split that exam paper up, because that exam paper is already split into the various topics, but you need to make a note for yourself which sections in that exam paper forms part of paper 1 and which sections form part of paper 2. Then another thing that is important is learning how to answer questions. And there is a number of verbs that is used when answering the various questions. So, Mr. Van Zyl, would you mind taking us through these next slides just to explain to the learners when they read the question, what verbs should they be looking for, and then how does that verb impact on how the marks are allocated to the learners?
Right. On the slide that you guys can see there is mark allocations. Normally those ones would be 1 mark. It's lower order questions, as we would name them, and those different verbs are the following: give or identify, list, mention, name, and state. Those verbs does not require you to go into detail with an explanation. That you merely just put the word down. It's recall from memory. It's lower order questions. So whenever you see those verbs, those are the ones that are 1 mark answers, and don't waste your time by going into depth to explain it. That's not what the question said. The next verbs are quite more important for you to know what you need to do. If you look at the PowerPoint, those verbs are the following. The first one says classify. Whenever you see the verb classify, it means you need to put it into a specific section. You can normally do this quite well if you put it in a table form. The next one is name. Name is also doesn't require you to explain too much. It's just naming something. Suggest, advise, and propose. All of those types of verbs will have a mark allocation at the end of the word or a short sentence. It's normally worth 2 marks. The next ones are also quite lower order, but they are also worth 2 marks per answer. Then one is define. The definition will have 2 marks at the end. Outline the same. It's a short little sentence. It's not a detailed sentence. As long as the essence are there, you will find your 2 marks at the end. The same with recommend or motivate or state. Okay. The next ones are middle order questions. Now here you need to be very careful in the way you construct your answer. Those are normally worth also 2 marks, but the mark is going to be split. And when the mark is split, it means that there must be a statement and a qualifier. So with other words, what you're going to say is, this is my statement, and explain why I say what I say. And those verbs are the following: describe, explain, distinguish, discuss, analyze, elaborate, showing the impact, or you need to apply a technique, or any of those things. Now, in the slides that we are going to do now, I've made provision to show you exactly how those marks will be allocated from different types of verbs.
Okay, so it is important then for the grade 12s to learn these set of verbs, because it will help them in terms of time management, and also to know how to answer the question, because it is advised that learners write full sentences. A lot of the problems at the end of the year come when learners don't write the full sentences, and that's perhaps because they haven't learned the verbs and how to answer the questions correct.
Yes. What I've also found with papers in the past for marking mid or end of year exams, a learner you can see that the learner knows the work, they've obviously studied, but the way the sentence was constructed basically means they're missing out on one mark. So with other words, you will have a learner that knows the work but get a low mark, a 50% or a 60%, just because they miss out on the second mark.
Okay, so there you have it, grade 12s. Make sure that you have a clear understanding of the various verbs that are used, and when you have to just make a general statement, yet using a full sentence, or when you have to clarify your statement in order to get the second mark. So make sure that you use this as part of your exam preparation, because it will make your life a lot easier and save you a lot of time in the examination. So what we're going to do at this stage is we have a pre-test in the booklet that you have been given. So if I've got this booklet in front of me, which is the Term 1 Term 1 tutoring booklet, and in this booklet we have what is the pre-test. So this is something that you should now do. So you're going to pause the video, and you're going to answer all these questions on pages 3 to 6, and you must do this before you have actually gone through the content. So this is important because it will give you a clear indication as to what you already know and what you need to prepare. So at this point, you're going to pause the video. You're going to make sure that you answer all these questions on page 3 to 6. Answer as many questions as you possibly can. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, because in your mistakes, that's where your learning will take place. So write the answers. Perhaps you want to use a pencil, so that once we have gone through all the content, you can come back and then mark your work and check to see what you've got correct, and whatever you have incorrect, you can then erase and then fill in the correct answer. Okay, so grade 12s, pause the video at this stage, and then you can answer the pre-test. Okay, so we have now completed the pre-test, and now we're going to go into our first topic that we're going to, or topic of discussion for today, which is the impact of recent legislation on businesses. And in the slide, we have a list of all the acts that you need to know. There's quite a few acts, and there's a lot of implications and impacts of all these acts on the business. And Mr. Van Zyl will be going through these acts with you.
Mr. de Klerk, maybe it's also important to note here, it is very important for assessment purposes that you get the name of the act right. You may use an abbreviation like Employment Equity Act. You may use the words EEA, and that would be accepted. But you cannot use any other names to try and describe the same thing. It must be the correct word. Okay, you don't normally need, you will see in many of the past papers, if you use those as study material, that they put there as act so-and-so of that and that date. You don't need to know all of that. Employment Equity Act or Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Act would suffice, as long as that's the correct description. Okay, can you just go back one slide, sir? Also, I want to point out a few common errors. The first one I've already dealt with. We are not writing out the correct name or the correct abbreviations. you also sometimes confuse different legislations with one another. Like many people confuse the Consumer Protection Act with the NCA, and you guys answer one for the other, and then you lose the marks. Or you would confuse broad-based black economic empowerment with employment equity. And that will have an impact on the answer that you give. Now, I've put there in red, and important to note, there are certain things that is applicable to all acts in the examination guidelines. But certain other acts like BBBEE or BCEA has certain other things that they are also going to require. So make sure that you learn those things in your exam guidelines that it says applicable to all acts, but then also take into consideration there are certain other things that you would also need to do for that specific act. So read it very carefully. Now, the first act that we are going to do today, and we are not going to do the full act, we do not have enough time to do so. I'm following your booklet that you have received. Now, the first act that we are going to do is the Skills Development Act. Now, as I said, there are a number of things that you need to look out for when you do the Skills Development Act. You need to know all the things that are applicable to all the acts that make sense to for the Skills Development Act as well. You need to know the nature, the purpose, the advantages, the disadvantages, all of those things. But also, which forms part of this act, is SETAs, or the Sector Education and Training Authorities. Now, I want you to take a specific note on what SETAs stand for. Sector Education and Training Authority, because that is also important. I think people forget that sometimes. Now, SETAs form part of the Skills Development Act, but because that is true, people oftentimes confuse the purpose of SETAs as the same as the purpose of the Skills Development Act, and it is absolutely not. Those are two different things that we are going to address today. Right. Now, the first question that you need to ask yourself then is, what is a SETA? Now, I've said there, each sector, or I would rather call it a type of an industry of the economy, has a specific SETA. Now, I have identified a few SETAs there for you. The one is Agri-SETA, and that's the SETA that is responsible for the agricultural industry. Then I've got the Food and Beverages SETA that is responsible for training and development within the food and beverages industry. Or Services SETA. There are many, many more SETAs for every type of industry. And what SETAs do is they oversee the training of that happens within that sector of the economy. But now you need to remember one thing very clearly. A SETA does not train. SETAs just make sure that the training is of a specific nature. And I always use the example to say, you guys are going to write an exam at the end of the year. It's a standardized exam that conforms to certain norms and standards, so that we know that the matric certificate that you get are the same as the matric certificate of people 2 years ago, or people in Mpumalanga, or people in Limpopo. If you pass that matric exam, your standard will be the same and it's comparable. Now, that is what a SETA does. It makes sure that the standards of training is of such a nature that a worker can use that for job-seeking purposes, or that it can lead to a formal qualification like a diploma or whatever it may be. Okay, so the first question that we are going to deal with is outline, explain, or discuss the functions of a SETA. Now, you can see I have laid it out like this. The first part of your differences or the functions I've put in the format of outline. The first one says report to the Director General, and you can see that the 2 marks form part of the end. The next one is promote and establishes learnerships. Now, guys, they don't offer a learnership. They just promote learnerships, and they make sure that learnerships are of a required standard. Now you can see that I've also highlighted the sentences with green, and those green means that is the essence of the sentence. Those words have to be there for you to get the 2 marks. You don't need to go into too much detail when it comes to outline questions. The 2 marks will be given at the end. Right, I'm going to move on to the next one, and it says discuss or explain. Now guys, here you would need to have a statement and a qualifier, and it's to your advantage to make sure that you write in a proper full sentence. The first one says provide accreditation. Now the second part is provide accreditation for what? For skills development facilitators, and that's the qualifier, that's your second mark. The next one, it says register. Register is the word, the keyword that we are looking for, but what do we register? Learnership agreements or learning programs. Or the next one says approve workplace skills plans and annual training reports, and that is so that we ensure that you write in a full sentence. Right, common mistakes that oftentimes happen when we speak about SETAs. The first one is SETAs are not the ones that implement the Skills Development Act. Many times when they ask for functions of SETAs, an answer might come, implement the Skills Development Act, and it will not be accepted because that is not the function or the role that they play. The next one, SETAs do not train people. They are not a training authority. People don't go to their offices to be trained. But what happens here is they make sure that training is of a required standards. Okay, the next one, the purpose of the Skills Development Act and SETAs are not the same. It is an act versus an institution, and those two things are not the same. Although SETAs form part of the Skills Development Act, the purpose is not the same. Right, the next act that we are going to do is called the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. The abbreviation for the Basic Conditions of Employment Act is the BCEA. And the purpose of the BCEA, in short, is to make sure that employees are not going to be exploited. It sets out minimum, and you can see I've highlighted the word minimum there, requirements that will be used to set up an employment contract. Now what it means is, if you say minimum, I may not offer a person less than what is stipulated in the Act. I can always offer them better conditions, but not worse. An employer can offer an employee better conditions, but not worse. For example, an employer may offer an employee 40 days paid ordinary leave, but may not offer them less than 21 consecutive days. Okay, and as I said in the beginning, this is done to ensure that we do not exploit our employees. Now, the next part of your booklet asks for the provisions of the BCEA. Now, there are various different provisions that you guys need to know quite well. And I have put there on the slide what a provision is. A provision is the specific thing that the Act requires an employer to comply with. If an employer asks an employee to work overtime, the provision says the employee has to receive 1.5 times his normal wage. You cannot change that or alter that or renegotiate that with your employee. This is what the Act says, and that is what needs to happen. Okay, so that is a provision. Now, what is very important here, a provision must be stated correctly. You will later on see when we deal with especially leave, that the correct terminology must be used. Last year, they didn't accept certain answers because it forms part of one type of provision, but when we get there, I will explain that to you quite well. Right, so I'm going to move on to the provisions of the BCEA. I've broken it down for you in different sections. Now, the first one is regarding work hours. Now, your normal work hours, say a worker may not work for more than 45 hours a week. If a worker should, for example, then work a 5-day week, he may not work more than 9 hours a day. If you take 5 times 9, it will work out to 45. If a worker works a 6-day week from, let's say, a Monday to a Saturday, then he may not work for more than 8 hours in that day. The next one that's got to do for me with working hours is overtime. Now, there the act is quite strict. A worker may not work for more than 3 hours overtime per day. It can be renegotiated if there's an order that you need to fill, but overtime may not exceed more than 10 hours per week. Now, when a worker works overtime, they also need to be compensated for that, and you would need to pay them 1.5 times their normal rate of pay. Okay, there are other provisions as well. This one is regarding leave. Now, leave, we've got various different forms of leave, and this is where you need to be very careful by getting the terminology right. The first one is annual leave. Annual leave is your normal leave. Normal leave would normally be accepted as well as 21 consecutive days paid leave in any given year. It cannot work on the principle of no work, no pay if it is normal leave or annual leave. What will not be accepted is if you write something like holiday leave. Holiday leave is not a provision, and you should use the words annual leave or normal leave, 21 consecutive days. Then we've got sick leave. Sick leave is 6 weeks paid leave in any 36 days cycle. But guys, this is where you need to know what you are dealing with. When we're speaking about sick leave, is literally when a person is sick and he is booked off by a doctor and cannot perform his duties. If he is absent for more than 2 days, the employer has the right to ask for a medical certificate to state the reasons why a person is sick. He's got 36 days in a 3-year cycle. So let's say in year 1, a person is really, really sick, and they take all 36 days in year 1, that means that there's no more sick leave for the next 2 years. Okay. Normally then what will happen is they will eat into his normal leave or his annual leave. Right, the next one, and this is where you need to be very, very careful, is family responsibility leave. 3 to 5 days leave, paid leave per year, in the request in the event of death of an employer's spouse, life partner, parent, adoptive parent, and so forth. Now guys, I've put there in highlights because this came up in last year's paper and they did not accept it, is paternity leave. Paternity leave forms part of family responsibility leave, and therefore you cannot get the mark for family or for paternity leave. You can get it as a discussion part, 1 mark, but normally when you answer questions like this, and the question might say, discuss leave in terms of the BCEA for 9 marks, then you know 2 marks are going to be allocated for naming the correct form of leave, annual leave, sick leave, and family responsibility leave, and then 1 mark for a discussion. Now, if you wrote paternity leave, you cannot get the mark for naming the specific provision in terms of leave. So be very careful with how you tackle this question.
Mr. Van Zyl, there's always a question or query around this maternity leave. Now, we know it's 4 months consecutive leave, but whether it's paid or unpaid is always an uncertainty. People are of the opinion or the belief that it's normally paid leave, and businesses must pay you during that time. Can you clarify that for us?
I can. Maternity leave is definitely not paid leave. It is unpaid leave, and all it instructs the employer to do is to make sure that when the employee comes back, that the job has been reserved for them. An employee that takes maternity leave normally then claim money from the unemployment insurance fund. It could be because that's the minimum condition. Remember, certain employers may be willing to pay for their employees full salary during that time. It's up to them. but they may not offer them less. So they cannot tell them, listen, you cannot take 4 months maternity leave. I'm only going to make it 2 months. No, the Act is very clear on what it says. 4 months maternity leave, but it is unpaid leave.
So basically, the provision is there to make sure that the person has sufficient time to recover and to also look after their child once they've been born, but also reserves the job for them.
Yes,
And therefore, if companies do pay you that during that time, you should consider yourself lucky.
exactly.
Otherwise, you have to, like you said, have to claim from the UIF, but business is not compelled to pay you for during that time.
No, they are not compelled, and there's actually companies like Virgin that makes that a year, and they also then work in paternity leave from Virgin. It's not required by the Act, sometimes also up to a year, because it is believed that the bonding period with the child at that young age is very important. So that is just something.
So then,
to
if companies
remember.
do choose to pay you during that time, we can consider that a fringe benefit.
You can, it's a fringe
Yeah.
benefit, exactly.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up, Mr. Van Zyl.
Right. There's also a number of other provisions of the BCA. I know they like leave quite a bit. The one is meal breaks, and that's 1 hour after every 5 hours of continuous work. Now, sometimes a business will have only half an hour lunch break, but then they've got a tea break after 2 hours and so forth. So for after 5 hours of continuous work, the Act says it must then have an hour break. Then working on public holidays. Now, guys, if a public holidays falls within the normal work week and the person doesn't come in, that leave is paid leave. For instance, it is Christmas on the Wednesday, then that person is entitled to take Christmas Day. It's a public holiday, and you have to pay, as the employer, that person, although they are not at work. You cannot use the no work, no pay principle. The other thing is, if an employee has to work during that public holiday, which oftentimes happen, you need to compensate them for that, and that is normally 2 times their normal rate of pay. If there's also normally, you can think about it working on weekends. If that falls within your normal work hours, then you cannot say that I'm working on a public holiday, and because it's on a weekend I need to get 1.5 times. It doesn't normally work like that. Okay, the next one comes with the termination of employment. Now, guys, a termination of employment for a person can happen when a person is dismissed because he's done something wrong, or a person is retrenched, or when a person resigns. And then the Act says the following needs to happen. An employee must be given 4 weeks' notice. So if I say to a person, I'm no longer requiring your services, I need to tell that person, you've got 4 weeks in which to find yourself new employment. Now, either that person needs to work those 4 weeks still full out and you pay them afterwards, or you can ask the person to leave immediately, but then you need to pay them for the 4 weeks that they are not there. Okay, so that's very important. And then the next one, and that's easy to remember, is child labor. It is illegal to employ children under the age of 15 years. They may not do any employment because there's actually a law that says that a person who is younger than 15 must be in school, and I cannot take that basic human right away from a person. So therefore the Act also says it is illegal to employ children under the age of 15.
I always get a question when I teach this section of work as to what about child actors and people acting in or performing adverts on TV and so on. Then I always have to remind them that is not their primary objectives. They need to be in school. As you said, legally you have to be in school up to the age of 15 or until you complete your grade 9 year. But you can be employed in that circumstances if you're a child actor or you're involved in advertising, but that's not your primary role, and obviously your parents' permission, and there's lots of other legal implications for employing people during that age. So yes, you can work, but it's not going to be your full-time job. Your full-time job during that time is actually being in school. So that's often a question I get.
But it is also then important, but this is not in the ambit of this presentation, but it's nice to talk about. I think there should have been a provision that the child needs to complete or must have at least a homeschooling, registered homeschool or something that they have to complete by law.
Okay.
Right. The next act is sometimes a bit difficult for people to understand, and the confusion comes in when they think about the Labor Relations Act, is they immediately think about trade unions, and that's not wrong. But the Labor Relations Act is not just about trade unions. Now, I've chosen this particular picture with intent. You can see that there's an employer on the one side and an employee on the other side, and they look like they want to fight. And you have a person in the middle that tries to mediate. Now, that is called collective bargaining, and that is also under the ambit of the Labor Relations Act. Now, what you need to remember, and you can go to the next slide, Mr. de Klerk, the Labor Relations Act has one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to make sure that the relationship between the employer, the employee, and the state is in good nick. Now, there's an incentive for everybody there to make sure that they have a good relationship. If you think about the state has to look after the welfare of the people living within its borders. And in order to do so, they need to get money. And the way that the government gets money is in the form of taxes. Now, there's only one way of getting taxes, and that is if businesses employ people. So there's income tax, and there's also businesses that need to perform well so that they can pay over companies tax towards the government. Now, a business can only make money if they have employees working for them. Now, if there's labor unrest, then it means no production takes place, and therefore the business is out of pocket as well. Employees need businesses to look after them and to pay them money for them to feed their families. So therefore, it is an imperative for the whole country, for all of us, that the relationship between the state, the employers, and the employees are in good nick. And that is what the Labor Relations Act is all about. Now, guys, what is important for those three parties? The balance of power must be intact. So with other words, we shouldn't have a situation where the one has so much power over the others, and that throws out the balance. So that is what the Labor Relations Act is all about. Therefore, employees will be represented by their trade unions, employers organizations, which bargain together in the same level of power. Right. Now let's look at the purpose of the Labor Relations Act. First of all, it provides a framework for labor relations between employers and employees. And then, of course, it promotes collective bargaining. Now, that word is very important for you to know. Collective bargaining means that employers, through their employers' organizations, negotiate with employees through their trade unions for better wages or working conditions or whatever the case may be. But that is normally done on a sectoral level. So with other words, if we take mining, for example, if there is a deal struck between unions and mines, then that deal is applicable to all the mines in that sector as a collective. And that is why it is called collective bargaining. It is not just done between one employee that wants to negotiate with a mining giant. It is all the employees that will get the benefit as a collective. The next one, it promotes workplace forums. Now, guys, a workplace forum is another concept that you guys need to know quite well. A workplace forum is where employees, and they don't have to be represented by a trade union there, will come together and they will have input into the decisions that the company makes, especially when it affects the workers. So they take part in decision making. So that's a very important concept. The next one, it establishes the labor court and labor appeal courts, and then it promotes simple procedures for the registration of trade unions and employer organizations to make collective bargaining happen. Right. Our next act is called the Consumer Protection Act. Now, guys, as I told you earlier, it is oftentimes confused with the National Credit Act. The Consumer Protection Act and the National Credit Act are often confused. Okay, now I've put down there for you what the difference really is. An NCA, or the National Credit Act, deal with issues regarding credit. Now, I've put there in red what credit means. Credit is any transaction where you borrow money to be repaid at a later stage, like bank loans or any other instance where goods are taken to be repaid at a later stage. If you think about something like Edgar's, if your parents have an Edgar's account or a Jet account, they will take clothing now and they will repay that clothing over a certain period. So it's not money that they borrow, but actually they take the goods and repay it at a later stage, and that is called credit. Now, anything that's got to do with that is the National Credit Act, if it's got to do with credit. If that right does not have anything to do with credit, then it falls under the ambit of the Consumer Protection Act. Okay, the Consumer Protection Act deals with consumer rights and ensures that consumers are not exploited due to unfair marketing practices, and that could be false advertising or goods that may harm them or something like that. Now that falls under the ambit of the Consumer Protection Act. Okay, now guys, also a common mistake that is oftentimes made in an exam is people confuse consumer rights with human rights. Now, I've tried to explain it in this slide in such a way that I think human rights are rights that are inalienable. It cannot be taken away from you, and it's guaranteed to you in our Bill of Rights. It's got to do with things like freedom of speech, right to dignity, right to life. Those are general rights that we have as human beings. But consumer rights are rights that the consumer has when they make purchase decisions. I've bought a product, and now the product doesn't do whatever it advertised. I have certain rights to get my money back or something like that. So when I make purchase decisions, that is when I'm going to be looking at the Consumer Protection Act and consumer rights. Now, you need to discuss I've just made it 3 consumer rights here because I wanted to illustrate a point how something can be asked. If a question asks you, discuss 3 consumer rights for 9 marks, you know that the mark allocation is 9, but there's only 3 consumer rights that you need to do. You know that the mark allocation will work like this. You will get 2 marks for naming the consumer right, the right to choose, and then the 1 mark for writing the answer or the discussion part. Consumers may also shop around for the best price. Next one, right to privacy, and so it carries on. Now, you would also see that I have marked the first 3 only. Now, normally when you get a question like this and there's a stipulation on the amount of things that you need to answer, like in this case 3, then the marker is instructed to mark only the first 3 answers. The 4th one, you will get a line through called cancel, and that will no longer be taken into consideration. Many learners believe that I can just write as many as I can and hope that all of them or somewhere there will be something that is correct. Now, the problem with that is your first 3 can be all wrong, and your bottom 3 will be all correct, and you will still get 0 marks because the marker is only instructed to mark the first 3 that he sees. So the last one there is very important. The right to apply for credit and be free from discrimination. You can see I've made 2 red crosses there. The free from discrimination and the right to apply for credit is, first of all, in the NCA, and therefore it cannot be seen as a consumer right under the Consumer Protection Act. Right. My next act is going to be broad-based black economic empowerment. Now, guys, there's a big misunderstanding sometimes about BBBEE and employment equity, and you will hear people either complain or are for it, but they use these two terms interchangeably, and that is actually not what BBBBB or BBBEE is all about. Okay, now it has a history, and I've put the history down because I think if you've got a history behind it, you know why it exists, you will understand the act also a lot better. Now it says the majority of the country does not share in the wealth of the country. Businesses need to be encouraged to share the wealth or give the majority of the country a chance to have access to the means to create wealth. Now, guys, oftentimes they will ask you, what can you do to comply as a business with the legislation? And you can say something like, the way you comply is you need to apply the 5 pillars that we will do just now, and that is what you can do. The first pillar is ownership. Now, that is the pillar that is probably worth the most points on a BBBEE scorecard. They will take these 5 pillars and they will assign a score as to how well you are represented in terms of ownership, black person owning a part of the business. And they will assign a score. And so they will assign a score for each of these 5 pillars. Okay, ownership. Does black people share in the ownership of the business? Like, do they own shares or equity? Equity means shares. Do they have, how many of the black people have you appointed in terms of top management, your directors and so forth? That is called management control. The next one is skills development. Does the business engage black people in learnership programs so that they can learn the skills to be part of the economy? The next one, enterprise and supplier development. In what way does the business support black-owned businesses? With other words, if I buy from businesses that are in the hands of black people or other BBBEE companies. And the next one is socio-economic development. In what way does a business distribute resources to selected people where there is a need, specifically in areas where it is important to uplift economically? You can think of things here like learnership programs and things like that for people in poorer communities so they can uplift their skills so that they can also participate in the economic life of South Africa. Okay, so in here we have got a case study. I think this came from your booklet, and I am going to answer it. I don't have a slide specifically with the answers on it, but we can do it together quickly. The case study says Meat Market Ltd specializes in applying fresh meat to customers. The company gave some of its shares to the previously disadvantaged employees. They were also offered learnership programs. Good. Now the first question says, name the act that Meat Market Ltd is complying with in the scenario above. Now guys, we all know that this is now going to be BBBEE because you can clearly see 2 pillars being adhered to. And then they ask you to identify 2 pillars in the act. Now you need to quote from the case study. Now guys, this is going to be very important. Whenever a question asks you to quote, we are under instruction as markers to look for the essence of the quote. Now, I would like to implore you to rather write the entire sentence down, not part of it, write the entire sentence down, because then you know that you cannot go wrong. Now, the first one, the company gave some of its shares to the previously disadvantaged employees. What happens if you're a shareholder? A shareholder owns part of the business, so definitely the pillar that belongs to is ownership. The next one says they also offered learnership programs, and that is to the employees. Now, learnership programs refers to training, so that must be skills development. And you need to quote that entire sentence. Okay.
And the mark allocation for that would normally be 6 marks, 2 marks for identifying the pillar, and 1 mark for quoting the sentence.
That's correct. Right. Now, I think what you can do at this point is to pause the video and think about this question. I think me and Mr. de Klerk is quickly going to discuss it as well, but it's a way of thinking. Now, during this last 2020 COVID-19 pandemic, certain grant monies was made available for businesses that were forced to close down due to this, and they cannot earn an income. And part of those businesses were, of course, in the tourism sector. So when the grant money was received, the Minister of Tourism decided that she will allocate grant money based on your BBBEE status. So with other words, if there were businesses that didn't have a BBBEE status, with other words, they didn't really apply any of those 5 pillars, they would not be entitled to receive grant money. And some people took offense to this because they said that is racist in a time of need, and they took the matter to court. And I said that just so by the way, the court sided with the minister because the minister said, who said that a company must be black ownership in order to have BBBEE status? So that is an important question to think about, and the answer lies within the other pillars if you want to think about it. Mr. de Klerk, what do you think?
Well, we have to examine this statement quite clearly here. It does seem somewhat unfair that at some point, if I have no black ownership in my business, yet I'm going through the same pandemic, then I'm also at a disadvantage during this period of time. Okay? But looking at the concept broad-based black economic empowerment, the act is there to create equality where there was previously inequality. And that's what makes it quite a confusing case.
A confusing case. But the minister is right in the one sense that Wu says that ownership is the only thing that she's looking at. If a business complies with BBBEE and only has white ownership, but they buy their supplies from black-owned businesses, they put in a lot of money towards socio-economic development, it can still mean that they have a certain level of BBBEE
because they're
compliance.
Complying with the other pillars of the broad-based black economics. So then it's not actually an exclusive law. We're not excluding anybody really.
No, not really. But what we are trying to do is to uplift those that were previously left behind.
Yes.
In this case, black people, to also participate in the economic life of the country, to have access to create wealth and to make decisions regarding the economy of the country.
But it is a very interesting topic of discussion. I'm sure we can go on for hours discussing what's right and wrong and what our opinion is. But it is a very good question to think about. So grade 12s, that is some food for thought for you. And it would be interesting to see if that were some sort of question in the exams, what type of responses we would get from that. So we'll continue now with the next act, which is the Employment Equity Act.
Okay, right. Now, guys, as I said to you, the Employment Equity Act is oftentimes confused with BBBEE, and the two things are used intertwined. But it's actually not. Employment equity refers to filling up vacancies within a business. It's not about economic activity or ownership of the economy. This is about employment practices. And equity refers to us having equal opportunity. Now, what that means is that we should have no discrimination, or I'm going to qualify that, no unfair discrimination in the workplace. Now, I've said to you, as with any other act, there are reasons why this act came into being. Now, I'm going to refer you to my slide. South Africa comes from a past whereby certain people were actively discriminated against. It was not just black people, by the way. It was many, many more people. That included black people, people with disabilities, women specifically. And if you look at our makeup of the economy at the moment, it is actually still evident that white males still occupy way more than any other group on the top management tiers of many companies. And that is something that they would like to change, because it seems that there might be discrimination and people are unfairly discriminated against. Okay, so the act was designed to remove those barriers and unfair discrimination. But now you need to think of it almost like a foot race. If you start 100 meters and everybody starts at the starting point and the gun goes, the problem is certain people were quite a bit ahead of others. Some people start the race at 50 meters, some people start the race at 100. So now we need to make it equal, that everybody can compete equally. So therefore, they brought in what they call affirmative action, and that compels businesses, when they make employment decisions, to give preference to people from the designated group, and those are black people, women, and people with disabilities. And then, of course, employers need to report on their efforts to implement the Employment Equity Act every year. Right. Now, the question in your booklet was, suggest ways in which a business can comply with Employment Equity Act. The code word there, of course, or the verb, is called suggest. And it says, I said there, before you answer the question, think of the purpose of the act. Remember what we tried to do with this act when we answer this question. And the answer goes like this. I said, we must ask ourselves, how can we make sure that we do not unfairly discriminate against anyone? Remember, I told you we need to remove discrimination. The answer, pay everybody who does the same work the same way. That will earn you 2 marks, because that is exactly what the Act says. Or the alternative is, how can we make sure that others, that we adhere to affirmative action? The answer, give preference to people from the designated group when we make appointments. I just want to point out, you can see that the marks are allocated at the end of the sentence because the verb was suggest. Right. We are going to continue with the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. Now, guys, this is an act that comes into play whenever an employee is injured whilst he's performing his duty. And that means that person is out of pocket, either with medical bills that they need to pay, or the person is now no longer capable of earning an income because they could have been hurt so badly that they cannot do the work that they were normally used to doing. So we need to ensure that when a person works for us and they are injured, that that person gets compensated, and that's what the word compensation means. Now, guys, there's a big pitfall that we need to look out for here. Many people confuse the Occupational Health and Safety Act with the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. When they answer these questions at the end of the year, they go on and on about how we need to ensure that the workplace is safe, and we need to have health and safety representatives and all of those things. But that is actually under the Occupational Health and Safety Act that you guys have done in grade 11. COIDA actually looks at compensation. If an employee is injured whilst performing his duty, that person must then have a right to claim. Now, COIDA is actually a form of insurance, and later on, when you guys do insurance and investments, you will see that COIDA is one of the compulsory insurances, and that indemnifies an employer that pays over to the compensation fund every month, that if an employee becomes injured, then they can claim against the compensation fund. Now, guys, there are loads of things that can be seen as discriminatory. Now, discrimination in this case means to treat people differently or to treat them unfairly. So when you answer this question, always keep in mind those two words, treating people differently or unfairly. Now, there's a couple of things there. The first one, if you bribe an employee not to report an incident. Why don't I want him to report the incident? Probably because I never registered him for the compensation fund. So oftentimes it happens that the employer will then go to the employee and say, I'll give you 2,000 Rand if you say nothing. The next one, not allowing an injured employee to claim. That is discriminatory and illegal. Also, guys, the next one is to forward false information regarding previous claims. If a business has plenty of claims in a year, then we would say that that's a risky place to work, and that means they need to pay extra for the insurance that they need to pay. So what they sometimes do is, I don't want to say that we had previous claims so that I can save on the premium, and that of course is fraud. The next one, employers do not contribute to the compensation fund. Now guys, there is no, in this act, the employer is the only person who pays towards this fund. There is no need for an employee to pay towards this fund. So if an employer doesn't pay over the money, it basically means that the employee is not covered under the fund. And what will mean is the employer may not be in a position to compensate now because there's no insurance money, and that is just wrong. So guys, therefore, there are loads of penalties if you do not comply to the COIDA Act. The first one, you can be fined. That's an easy one to remember. That almost goes for all acts except BBBEE is fines. Businesses can be forced to make large payments if they do not take precautions like making sure the workplace is safe. They may be forced to pay recovery costs required by the compensation fund. Or you can take the business to court.
Okay, grade 12s. That has been quite a lot of work that we at Mr. Van Zyl has explained quite eloquently to us, and thank you, Mr. Van Zyl, for explaining in such detail all the different acts. But remember, that's not all the information that's included in the acts. These are just things that are highlighted as places where learners historically have struggled with certain things or been confused as to how to answer questions in a certain way, as well as different parts of information that has been popular in the examination. So it's things that have been highlighted. It's not everything that forms part of the different laws. At this point, I think we've gone through quite a lot of information, and we need to take a little 5-minute break and get up, stretch your legs, and go have a little break outside. And when we get back, we'll come back, we'll look at human resources as our next topic.